Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have to say, I have some cool news for you this week. I have a news flash. I am talking with somebody that's promised today for less stress, more joy, and more personal fulfillment. So if any of those have any interest to you, then you're going to want to stick around and hang out here with Robert White. He is the founder of Extraordinary People. How are you today, sir?
I'm well, Dave. It's wonderful to be with you and your listeners.
Awesome. Well, hey, when I see less stress, I'm done right there. I don't need the other two, but then you add, this is like icing on the cake, more joy and more personal fulfillment. So fill us in on what Extraordinary People is and what you got going on over there.
Uh, Extraordinary People is the third of three companies that I founded and led that does high impact experiential learning, either on a one-to-one kind of mentoring basis or with groups.
Okay.
And what we're up to is helping people see first anything from their past that might stop them from living that extraordinary life that I often talk about.
Okay.
So that's, clearing out any blame, shame, regret, guilt, or even past success, so that you can be present. That's always our first goal in both my mentoring and training work. And the second piece is to learn to better tell the truth about your current reality. A lot of us live in a story that maybe it makes us look good, maybe it helps us avoid some things. It has a lot of different purposes, but often it does not include the truth. And so if you learn to better tell the truth, the Buddhists have an interesting expression. They call it developing a selfless regard for reality. I think that's pretty good.
Sure.
And finally, if you've done those two things, you get the opportunity to create and live into a compelling vision for your life, for your future, that is not dependent on your past, not dependent on how you were parented or where you grew up, or your education level or your job experience, but rather it is a real expression of the authentic self.
Well, and you used three words right there: blame, shame, and regret. And so I think it's interesting place to start. It sounds like you start with people looking at their past to, like you said, clear out anything that's there. Do you experience a lot of people in your travels and in your work that struggle with the blame and the shame and the regret? Is that something that's more prevalent than we're probably thinking that it is?
Sometimes it's conscious for people. They have a nagging sense that some things that have happened in the past are being carried like a 50-kilogram rock in a backpack.
Okay.
So some people are aware of it. More people, it's unconscious, or they've become like our former president, Clinton, who was famous for compartmentalizing, for being able to put things aside and then live full out, which I think he pretty much has.
Sure.
And so successful people, what they do is they handle it. Now, I think some people would say they stuff it, they hide it,
Sure.
but
Sure.
but for good purposes. They put it aside so they can get out and do something in the world. And in working with successful people, and frankly, most of my clients are already quite successful, what I find is that they drive it down deep inside themselves so they can get on with life. And then it shows up in odd ways. And you hear people say things like, well, I don't know why I do that all the time. It really doesn't work for me, and yet I keep doing it. And then they go on with their life.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop them. That's the great news.
Sure.
But it handicaps them. And you find that it shows up in how they choose their people around them. The guy or woman in the business that somehow manages to ignore the fact that their wife or husband's cousin that they hired is totally unproductive, but he doesn't get fired.
Sure.
And you say, well, why would a really successful person keep that kind of dead weight around them? Well, it's usually in the past. It's something
Wow.
that they've compartmentalized, stuffed in, and are ignoring, but it's there. It's there in the unconscious self.
So you invest time and energy then, Robert, with entrepreneurs, business owners, professionals to start at that spot? I mean, are you investing a lot of time there, or is it something that is just a small part of the journey? I'm
It's
just
a
curious about that.
it's a relatively small part of the journey for most people. If it was going to be a large part, people need therapy, and that's not me.
Yeah,
You know, find a good therapist and work through that kind of stuff. But almost all of the people that I work with, that's not necessary. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but the time, excuse me, the time that we do spend to take the negative energy off of those kinds of things, it's time well spent. But you know, you don't dwell in it.
sure.
You just do a little quick spring cleaning.
Nice. And then, I mean, I wrote down like forgive yourself. So I don't know if that's similar to what you're talking about, but I think about, you know, for me, things in my past, I mean, I can't change a lot of what happened. I may be able to change my outlook on it. I may be able to change my path moving forward. But if I've wronged somebody or if I've wronged myself, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do. So do you kind of just have to acknowledge it and then move forward and then work on ways not to do that again? Is that similar to what happens?
You know, whether your kind of information source is the Bible or my book or something similar, uh, forgiveness is a really key aspect of living an extraordinary life. When you don't forgive somebody, of course, the pain is felt not by that other person, but by you.
Sure.
And some great teachers have taught that way before I ever talked about it. And Dave, something that you might find interesting, and I can tell you've given this some thought already, is I have an approach to guilt and shame that it's hard won. Let's say that the knowledge about that is hard won. And so here's the point, and that is that whatever you did back then, first of all, it's in the past. You cannot change it.
Right.
I mean, yes, you can ameliorate it. You can use various methods to apologize for it or make things right, but you actually can't change the event.
Right.
And if you carry that with you, what you need to realize is that at the time you did whatever you now feel guilt or regret or shame about, whatever happened back then, you actually made the best choice. Now, the outcome might not have been what you now think you wanted,
Sure.
but at that time, given who you were being, given the knowledge that you had, given the environment that you were in, you made the best choice. Today, would you make that choice again? Probably not.
Sure.
But forgiveness is rooted in realizing you made the best choice.
Yeah.
And that at that time, given everything happening in your life, that was your choice.
Sure.
And that's the past. Cannot change it. Let's get on. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm guessing then the human potential part that you talk a lot about, I mean, is looking forward. So, you know, you have a book and it's called Living an Extraordinary Life, and there's a bold promise in there. So, you know, what promise is in there for people that are willing to read that book?
Well, it is the promise of letting go of your past, better telling the truth, and choosing your future. The book is organized around three concepts: awareness, responsibility, and communication. And that comes mostly from my direct personal experience of a training right there in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right near close to your home, that I attended in my late 20s.
Sure.
I was a mess. I had married and divorced. I felt horribly guilty about it. I didn't talk to people about it, you know, typical kind of guy thing.
Sure.
But I felt very guilty about it, the failure of my marriage.
Sure.
I had a heart condition. I was having daily chest pain. I'd been told I would die by 35 by some, reputable doctors. And my business was failing. And a couple of friends went out to California and did this crazy training called Mind Dynamics. And they came back raving about it and said I should go. I said, no way. For 6 months, I said, no way. But in the 6 months, I watched their lives get better. And so I finally went a little negative and cynical.
Sure.
And it sounds like a cliche all these years later, but my life changed for the better. And that's what the book is organized around, is that those notions of, first of all, wake up, start and really, you develop kind of an enhanced sense of noticing yourself, the people around you, the environment around you. And then secondly, and probably the most powerful concept that it's made a difference in my life and in the lives of literally over 1 million people now, who are graduates of these 3 companies that I founded and led.
Mhm.
And that's the idea of taking 100% personal responsibility for your life.
Sure.
And then finally, developing a mastery level of communication, which includes listening, by the way. That's something that I had to really work on.
Sure.
And but also speaking and writing and body language and all of those things, because the way everything shows up in communication, like what you're doing with the podcast,
Sure.
it's a communication tool that you are using and using well, since I've done a little research on you.
Thank you.
And so that's how the book is organized. It's become a bestseller, and I'm very proud of it. I was very, very, very nervous. I stalled writing it for 20 years. And when it came out, and some people that I love and respect really liked it and bought copies for their families and friends. It was very gratifying, and it remains so.
That's awesome. Well, and I think you bring something up there, Robert, that I want to kind of circle back to, because you mentioned taking 100% responsibility for your life. And I think in today's world, it's super easy, to blame the government. It's easy to blame the competitor. It's easy to blame the team. The team blames the coach, or the team blames the owner, the leader, and so it's really easy to kind of put my hands up and say, hey, I didn't do this, and it's funny. We've done work in prisons, and it's crazy how many people in there, say, I didn't do anything wrong. But then the reality is that most people, when you really get to know them, they admit to what they've done, and, they have a remorse for that. So it's interesting because, where is that? I don't want to take responsibility. I mean, how do you work with people that come to you and are trying to blame the economy? They're trying to blame everything except taking that responsibility on. For somebody listening today that's stuck in that, trap, how do you help them out of that?
Well, first of all, is forgiveness. When I look at someone in my family or my life, or if in front of me in a coaching environment or in a training, I don't judge them for their victim role in life,
Okay.
because they're in a culture of victimhood. I was watching, I don't watch conventional television, I guess, and I haven't for many years. But I was sitting in an airport. That's a dangerous place for things to happen.
Sure, exactly.
In terms of learning, you really get exposed to all of life there.
Right.
But so I'm looking at this television, just kind of wasting time, I suppose. And the news is on. And, the local news all over America is the same. There's what I call Ken and Barbie.
Sure.
Usually two attractive people,
Right.
a little bit light on intellect. They're reading the teleprompter, right? But and then they throw the story to the street to get some random person's comment, right?
Sure.
So they do this around some issue, and then it comes back to the studio, and Barbie says to Ken, who's to blame for this? It's like the ultimate victim. It calls out the victim, right?
Sure.
Who's to blame for this? And I thought just that question indicates so much of the culture that people are part of. So
Right.
I have a lot of compassion for people that are living in a victim role. Generally, it means they've lost their power. Whatever their power is goes away the moment you take the victim role, because you're projecting it out onto something or someone else, right?
Sure.
Is
Sure.
responsible for your life. I easily use that word experiential when I talk about my work for many, many years.
Mhm.
And I know that it just kind of flies by people. But to answer your question directly, whether in my one-to-one work with executives or in a group setting, what we do is set up an experience where people actually see and feel and totally live a victim experience. And then we flip it 180 degrees
Okay.
and we have them tell the same story from an accountable point of view. And I go back to a story that actually I heard in Milwaukee in my 20s. A doctor told me this story in a training, and he slipped and fell in front of the elevators one day going from floor to floor. And I don't recall exactly what he broke, but he broke a bunch of bones in the
Hmm.
fall, and it meant he couldn't work for months. He was a surgeon.
Sure.
And so he's a victim, right? The hospital didn't keep that water off the floor. And so then we had him tell the accountability story. And this story's in my book. And when he told this story, you could see his face light up because he noticed the water on the floor for days and weeks earlier.
Mm.
And he was always too busy. I'm a surgeon. I'm not a guy that takes time to report the water on the floor, you know.
Sure.
And when he got that, he was accountable. I mean, he didn't put the water on the floor,
Yep.
but he noticed it and he didn't do anything about it. And when you move through some of your victim stories that way and take a look at how you created it, I mean, it probably wasn't alone.
Right.
There probably were some things where you could go, well, I don't know, there's some other people involved here. I'm
Yeah.
a victim.
Wow.
But to be a victim is to be disempowered.
Wow, that's really helpful. And I hope for somebody listening today that that really resonates because, you know, I've never heard, I have to say, full disclosure prior to that, I've never heard somebody have compassion for the victim. You know, usually you or a person is trying to talk them out of that. You know, don't be a victim, be a victor. You know, talk them out of where they're at. Shine a light on their blind spot. You know, whatever it is that people, you know. And again, we're good natured generally. We're good. Our intentions are generally good. Unfortunately, sometimes we can really you know, make matters worse. So for anybody that is on today that is in that, you know, blame role, that victim role, at least realize that, you know, there is compassion there. I think that was very well said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that piece. And I feel like that's kind of moving me into the less stress. I feel like all of a sudden I've forgiven myself. I'm trying to, you know, understand where to go from here. So the less stress, more joy, more personal fulfillment is automatic. It feels like it's automatic. If I do a couple things in my life, those things are automatic. Is that, or do you still have to work at, you know, less stress, which is kind of an oxymoron to work at less stress? I'm just curious what your thoughts are there.
I believe that personally, I believe, and you know, part of this is rooted in spirituality or religion. Part of it is just, I think, a gift that God gave me upon birth, because I don't know the source of it really.
Sure.
But I think our journey is about discovering and living out our purpose. I noticed behind you that purpose word is very prominent on your wall.
Yep.
And finding out why are we here on the planet? We are, of all of the creatures, and you could say God's creatures, or if you prefer just creatures,
Sure.
of all the creatures, we're the ones that have choice. We're the ones that can change ourselves, change our environment, affect our future. And that's different than all of the other things that run, jump, crawl, slither, or simply grow in the field. We are not programmed for a specific outcome. If we just, and I believe, and my experience shows this to be true, is that when you become clear about your purpose, on why you are here. One of my dear friends, a participant in one of our trainings more recently, Arjun Sin. He's a famous marketer, big time jobs, and all of that kind of fame, and
Sure.
big time accomplishment. He reminds us that we are one of one. So if we are that unique, there's nobody else like us on the planet, and now 8 billion people.
Yeah.
We're unique, and we don't have to do anything to be unique. We are unique. So
Yeah.
I think the journey for people, for me certainly, is to discover your sense of purpose and then live it. And I realize in my life, I've had a series of realizations about my purpose, and it has changed as I woke up, that awareness piece and personal responsibility once again to own my purpose and to live consistent with it.
Well, and I think that that's well said. I think there's three types of people, and we always joke about it. There's people that watch things happen, there's people that make things happen, and then there's people that don't know what's happening, right?
Right.
And it's just interesting because, I think that I don't think there's anything wrong with any of them. I think the problem comes in is when one group starts attacking the other group. Why aren't you moving more, right? Why are you moving so much? So I mean, accepting, do you think that human potential is different for different people, in that I may have less potential than you, or you may have less potential than me? Do you feel that, or do you tend to see that we're not even close to what our actual potential is?
There's a famous saying that I have to find a different saying because it's so hard to say the saying, which is, if you're a street sweeper, be the best street sweeper you can be.
There you go. Sure.
Dave, I grew up in poverty and abuse, and I have one semester of university. I have a lot of excuses if I wanted to use them, but they're not useful for what I want to do with my life.
Sure.
And that notion that we have free will, and I jealously not only believe it, but want to protect it. I want to create it for my children. I want free will to be, and I think it's an essentially American quality. So there's a line in my book, when we released it, you hire the PR company and they send a copy of the book to these media outfits, and somebody reads the book, usually not the interviewer, by the way, I learned. Some grunt, is forced to read my book. Right. And they come up with 5 questions. And by the way, that one of the questions is always snarky. It's like a rule. They must learn that in journalism school or something.
Sure.
But the part of the book that got commented most, and this is out of print, television, radio, a lot of interviewers. It was interesting. Almost all of them, one of those 5 questions was about one sentence, which is that life is simple. This does not mean it's easy. Life is simple. This does not mean it's easy. And many people live life backwards. They think that life is complicated and that it should be easy. And it's the exact opposite of that. The great teachers for thousands of years have told us that life is not easy. And if you look at great teachers today, Jordan Peterson says life is tragic, and we need to learn how to navigate tragedy. The existential philosophers say that life is hard and then you die. I mean, that's a little dramatic. But my way of saying it is that life is simple. People have figured it out. Lao Tzu figured it out. Confucius figured it out. Napoleon Hill, who wrote probably the seminal personal development book, figured it out. Jesus Christ figured it out. Well, we can find the answers. They're all around us. But if we're looking for those answers from the standpoint of wanting it to be easy, it's a fool's game. It's a fool's errand, as they say.
Sure. Well, everything is so easy, right? I mean, everything's supposed to be easy. You put it in the microwave for 60 seconds and it's done, and there's a full meal, right? So we
Right.
have that, if you have to wait more than 90 seconds in a drive-through, man, there's a problem, so.
Yeah, you could have a rage attack with the police coming. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're justified in your actions, so,
Absolutely.
yeah, but I love to take 100% responsibility for that, for your actions and for what's going on. And I think that, again, that really kind of puts the onus back on to me, that if my life is not where I want it to be, then I need to, rather than look outward, I need to look inward to be able to start changing that path. If it's that painful, when it's painful enough, then people tend to change. And I think that's
That's true.
that's pretty typical. I hope that the people listening today are really taking this to heart, because you're offering less stress, more joy, and more personal fulfillment. So what's something that you've learned, Robert, from you talked about some failures and some challenges that you've had. What's something that you've learned from that, from your personal journey, that you feel comfortable sharing with us?
I mentioned that I mostly retired at 46, and I've been living in Asia for many years, and I returned to the US, and for the first time, I moved to Colorado, to Aspen, Colorado. I built a 14,500 square foot home on 76 acres just outside of Aspen.
Wow.
Bought my own jet,
Sure.
traveled for 6 months with the Lake John Denver. I did everything on the bucket list, and a whole bunch of things I never thought I'd have on a bucket list.
Sure.
Life was very, very good. And part of that, and I skied 80 days a year. I traveled all over the world, and my life was seemingly perfect.
Yeah.
But I started waking up in the morning thinking that God was not through with me, that there was something I was supposed to be doing that I hadn't done.
Okay.
And what came out of that really is the basis of the work that I do today.
Unknown caller.
Excuse me.
Sure.
We all forget to turn these things off, right?
No
And
worries.
I just did it.
That's all right.
And so I was in the midst of great abundance, and we had 2 adopted kids and two birth children, and life was just wonderful.
Sure.
I'm having this nagging feeling that something's missing out for me, and it created the foundation for the work that I do today. So the learning is that if you're running an organization or a family or a nonprofit or your neighborhood watch group, that there are these things that you need to handle, or things could get squirrely. So first one we've already talked about, which is purpose. Find out what your purpose is in the matter. Why are you there in that position that might call for some leadership?
Okay.
Why, secondly, is that you identify the values that are core to you, not aspirational values, but the ones that you really are committed to living. And identify 4 or 5 or 6 of them. And if you have to post them on your mirror so you see them every morning, or if you have to have an accountability partner to remind you of living consistent with those values, whatever it takes, but have everything you're doing grounded in your values, and hopefully positive, affirming values. And then the third one is that vision thing. Develop a compelling vision for the work. If you're cleaning up the riverbank that runs through your village, be clear what the end result looks like without all that trash and all that stuff, and that it's communicated and that it's compelling, that people want to engage in it with you. And then finally, what's your strategic intent? You got to have a strategy to get things done, and then it has to be intentional, has to be result oriented. So even though I had developed this thriving company, I essentially woke up one morning, and here I'm thinking there's something I'm supposed to be doing and I'm not doing it yet. I woke up one morning to have the top 7 people in my company leave overnight
Wow.
and take our client list with them and my methodology with them. And I lost $30 million in that
Wow.
little exercise. So that was my tuition. That's my university experience, Dave.
Wow. But
Unknown
you would
caller.
have, now you wish you would have just been paying the regular tuition rather than the 30 million, eh? Wow.
Exactly. My a different former wife, before PCs and computers were really widely used,
Sure.
she went to a graphics house and had fake, like a university graduation certificate made up to celebrate all of my losses and what I learned from them.
Sure.
Yeah,
Wow.
very clever.
Yeah.
Because that's another choice, right? When something really bad like that happens, can you laugh?
Yeah.
And again, the great teachers have taught that
Yeah.
for thousands of years. So
Usually it takes more than a week or two though to laugh, right?
yes. Well, you have to tell your victim story first,
Yeah, exactly. Yep, for sure. Well, so just to recap that though, Robert, purpose, values, I wrote down purpose, values, vision, and strategy. So, having those pieces, I mean, are very solid business practices as well, because I think we've all either encountered companies or worked for them that actually didn't have these. And if you don't have a purpose, it's really hard to know why you're there. It's hard to engage your team. It's hard to engage your customer. If you don't know what your core values are, if you don't have a vision for the future and then a strategy to make that work, I can see that's a really solid, business 101 type of scenario, that if you do those 4 pieces, the likelihood of success is pretty high. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that. As we start to come in for a landing today, I'm curious, you have a newer podcast called Conversations with Achievers podcast. So
Yes.
fill us in on what that's all about.
We're getting primarily business people, but people that have built something, people that have had some success, but have also hit some potholes along the way. I've
Sure.
discovered they're
Sure.
like me. And most of our learning, of course, comes when we get slapped upside the head by life.
Sure.
I'm getting already really successful people to tell their stories, and with the focus on, you accomplished this and this and this, and why, what was the core of their success. And
Sure.
then secondly, when you hit that pothole, how did you handle it? How did you recover? How did you get back on your feet? And so the listeners seem to engage around that.
That's awesome. That is so cool. And you mentioned a name that really brought me back to being a kid, and that was John Denver. So I really wanted to make sure that we flush that out a little bit before I let you go. So what was your relationship with John? How did you meet him, and how did that go?
Well, the first relationship was one of theft. In our trainings in Asia, we used his music.
Okay. Sorry, John.
John recorded 330 songs, and
Wow.
about 1/3 of them were about nature.
Okay.
His love, his deepest love.
Sure.
1/3 were about love, falling in or out of love. I heard one night live, he did a charity concert for the Music Associates of Aspen, in Aspen, and the music tent. And I had never heard him do this, but he introduced a set of 5 songs about falling in love and falling out of love, about divorce.
There you go. Nice.
But the other 1/3 of his songs were about personal development, his own development, and then he wrote songs about it.
Wow.
And so we used several of those songs. He has a song called "I Want to Live," which he says is in the cry of a newborn baby. I want to live.
Okay. Sure.
And it persists throughout our life. He has a song called "What One Man Can Do." He wrote it to celebrate the birthday of Buckminster Fuller, but it's true for everybody, what
Sure.
one man or woman can do.
Sure.
So
for sure.
we used the song, and when I was building the business in Japan, we had no money, we're just broke. And he comes to Japan, and he sold out the Budokan, 17,000 seats, 6 shows in 5 days.
Oh my
And
God.
I was one of those people that went,
Okay.
sitting way up in the rafters, the cheapest seat in the place. And I just thought, this guy's really an incredible performer. And he did 2.5 hours. With
Wow.
no dancing girls, no lasers,
Sure.
just,
Yeah.
just,
Him and a
and,
guitar. Yeah.
oh, and then of course, I'm in this country there where very few people spoke English, and they're all singing along with his music in English, so
Great.
it was
Sure.
impressive, but okay, it's just something that happened.
Sure.
And then later, I published a book when we became a lot more successful, called One World, One People.
Okay.
And actually, part of my vision, Dave, right now is to get it back in print. It's sold out.
Okay.
And I'd like to get it back in print. But it's a coffee table book, pictures of people from all over the world. Amazing book, the amazing Japanese photographer. And it was the first thing that I wrote in public. I wrote the little essays between the pictures. And nobody reads the essays, by the way. That's what I learned.
Just the pictures, right?
Enjoying the pictures. And when we did it, I sent a copy to John Denver. I hadn't met him, didn't know him. I networked around, found an address, sent it off, didn't hear anything. I later learned that at that time, he was receiving 7,000 pieces of mail a month.
Wow.
7,000 pieces of mail. So he's not going to answer any of them, right?
Sure, sure.
And then I moved to, after all those years in Asia, I moved to Colorado. And one of our employees, a trainer, came to me and he said, I'm a member of something called WinStar. And it was the nonprofit foundation that John Denver had set up to create a sustainable future for all of us. Okay. And he said, my trainer said, WinStar is a mess organizationally, as most nonprofits are, by the way, sure. And in my experience. And could you help? And I said, sure. And what that led to was I attended a board meeting. And after 3.5 up in Old Snowmass, Colorado, and on the WinStar property. And after 3.5 hours, I just met John, shake hands, hi, thank you for coming, kind of stuff.
Sure.
3.5 hours later, he turned to me and he said, he said to the group, Robert is here because he knows something about building organizations, and I'm wondering what feedback he has for us. And Dave, there are these moments in life where it's just so clear that you can get away clean. You can say something and avoid the truth, and everybody likes you for the moment. There you go. And I was very clear I could do that, or you could tell the truth, your truth. Sure. And I took a deep breath and I said, you folks are all well-intentioned. I know, I can feel that, hear that. But you spent 3 hours debating whether or not to have chickens on the WinStar property. And that's not the proper role of a board of directors. Wow. And that doesn't fulfill your purpose, as you stated.
Sure.
And then there's this silence where everybody turns and looks at John. And, I've done a lot of work with organizations. If that happens, you've got an organization that's a mess. Sure. Because they're waiting for how he reacts before they react.
Sure.
And in that silence, he burst into laughter. And then, then people go, with him. Yeah. And I thought, well, this thing, the house needs to be cleaned, and It's going to start right here in the board of directors. Wow. And after that meeting, he invited me to his home. He has a famous song, Starwood in Aspen. He lives in this very exclusive development called Starwood. And we went up to his house. We sat down in his library. His library had a grand piano in it. Oh, and thousands of books on the shelves. Only one book was out, and it was on the piano, and that was our book, One World, One People. Wow. He had not connected the two. But John was almost a professional photographer, so he loved the book. He loved the book. So wow. So that's how our relationship started. I did have the pleasure of traveling with him for 6 months where he did a concert one night, and the next night we would do this Bucky Fuller inspired event called Higher Ground,
Okay.
which we did all over the world, actually.
Sure.
But our families vacationed together. We sang Christmas carols in the barn together.
Wow.
You know, all that kind of stuff. I went to his when he wed his second wife. I was there. You know, all of those very personal things.
Wow.
My
that's
kids,
fantastic.
my kids taught him the rude Christmas song from the school bus. You know, the kid adapted rude versions of all of our Christmas favorites.
Oh my
And he
gosh.
So we had a lot of fun together. We got divorced together. Our now ex-wives are still best friends,
Sure.
and they dropped the hammer on us in the same week. And a lot
no.
of bad things happened together.
Sure.
And we
Wow.
learned together, got off our victim roles together.
Sure.
But I miss John as a friend, and I'm comforted by what I learned from him, from the experiences we had together, and by his music.
Wow, that is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. I mean, when I saw that in prep for today, I was like, man, it just brought back the memories of just an innocent kid, playing these innocent songs, and you don't know any of the backstory, or you don't know any of the tragedy or anything. You just listen to this song and you're just like, wow, this is so relatable. So that's really awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
There's one thing that I will mention that
Yeah, for
your
sure.
listeners can do. You can go on YouTube and look
Unknown
up
caller.
look up. Excuse me, I thought I had turned this off.
That's all right.
And if you look up John Denver, The Gift You Are, you're going to hear a song that captures a whole lot of our training, because it was written as a result of John's attendance in the training that we did for him and the WinStar board and staff.
Wow.
And the lesson that's in it, The Gift You Are, is the poet's version of an exercise we do, where at training we clear all the chairs out of the room. We have people pair up, standing face to face, and we give them the assignment one at a time to complete the sentence. Dave, the gift I see in you is.
Wow.
And then whatever comes up for you, you say it, and the other
Yeah.
person can only say thank you. They can't justify it. They can't
Yeah.
hide from it. They just have to say thank you. And then you reverse roles. And that other person says to you, the gift I see in you is, and you say thank you. And then you go find another partner. So there were 32 people in that room. So
Sure.
you get feedback from 31 people of the gift they see in you. And at the end of that exercise, and remember, I'd been back in the US at that point, like 1 year. And I led that training myself. And John Denver is laying on the floor sobbing. I'm running the exercise, so I'm not noticing what's going on. But at the end of the
Sure.
exercise, he's gone. And so I didn't know what to do. And I think my career is over.
Yeah. Big time, right? Yeah.
Big time failure here. So I laid down on the floor with him. And what I learned there was that 31 people gave him feedback. Not one person said, the gift I see in you is your music. Not one.
Wow.
And what he said to me later was, he said, I know I'm a good musician. I'm a good composer. I'm a good guitarist. I'm a good singer. What I didn't know is that I'm a good man, because the gift they saw in him was his commitment to his family, his commitment to the sustainable future for all of us, his love of nature. They saw him as a human being, not as a star, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And he said, laying there on the floor, he said, I'm going to write a song about this. So that's the song I'm recommending. Wow. And remember that he used it as part of his encore for the following 3 years until he died.
Hmm.
That he would have people sing. He would put the chorus up on the big screen
Sure.
and have people sing it to each other
Wow.
with him. The Gift I See in You.
Wow. So it's called The Gift You Are. And if you
By
look
John
at
Denver.
YouTube, you'll find that.
You'll find it.
That's
Lots
fantastic.
of versions of it, actually.
Wow.
So, but it's all about learning, Dave. Anything we've learned before is inadequate to this crazy, fast changing future.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
keep learning. That's what I keep reminding myself.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for investing time. And I just want to share with people listening, if something kind of resonated with you today, if something is gnawing at you, I mean, Robert talked about something that was gnawing at him, try really hard not to go to your next activity, go to your next podcast, because that may fleet away and not come back. And, sit with it for a little bit. Robert, if somebody wants to reach out to you and has some questions, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Well, my new website is therobertwhite.com.
Okay.
So that's the best way. And on there, you get a chance to sign up for my weekly e-zine. It's called An Extraordinary Minute. It's an idea that's something that intrigued me and my comments on it that can be read. And it comes once a week and easy to unsubscribe if it becomes clutter to your inbox. But
Sure.
what it does is set up a relationship between us, because it's easy to hit reply, and I answer all of my emails. So and the other thing is, if you're running an organization or of any kind, I offer a free 30-minute issue consult. And
Okay.
so you can sign up for that right on therobertwhite.com.
Awesome.
And it's all about relationship. So if you feel like we need to connect, let's connect.
That is so cool. So if you're listening and you choose not to connect with Robert, that's totally fine. Just don't get mad at him or me later in your life because you didn't click that button when you were supposed to, because there's a few people, I'm guessing right now, that are listening going, wow, this has really touched me and I want to learn more. Whether it's about the purpose, the values, the vision, or the strategy, whether it's about his story, whether it's about stress and joy, personal fulfillment. There was so much here that we crammed into today's podcast. So thank you again so much, Robert, for hanging out with us. And I can't wait to watch The Gift You Are. I'm going to get done with this and watch it. And if I cry, I'm calling you back, because this better not be. That's what I have a feeling is going to happen. So
It might happen.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, and can't wait to keep learning from you.
All the best to you, Dave, and to your listeners.